Hi, everyone out there, glider pilots around the world. Welcome again to another episode, or another ground school, another glider ground school. Uh, on this one, we're going to go through. This one is really meant for transition power pilots. That is, uh, airplane pilots that already have a rating, whether a license and a rating to fly airplanes. And if you want to get a glider license, well, what do you have to do? What do you have to know? I mean, it's what do you have to know, and what do you have to be able to do in terms of flying in order to get that G put on your commercial or private license. And so to figure that out, I recruited my current star uh, uh, student who is a CFI candidate. He is already a CFI. Matter of fact, he has a lot more CFI ratings than I do. He's multi-engine, CF double I, instrument instructor. He flies the jump plane, the twin engine jump plane. He's a multi-engine CF double I. And he flies a jump plane, a turbine Twin Otter flies that. He's got, I think, 1,200 plus hours now, and give him a congratulations. He just celebrated his 20th birthday, and so anyway, Eli is one of our members at Soaring Society of Boulder, and he flies our tow plane as well, and will give us a overview on what you have to do if you're an airplane pilot and you want to transition to be a power pilot, a glider pilot. And certainly he knows because he did it and did it quite well, I think. So anyway, let me introduce to you Eli Green. And Eli, you ready to take it away?
Yeah. So I'll go ahead and share this. Yeah, we'll be talking, like you said, about the airplane to glider transition. So we'll kind of go over what it takes to actually make that transition, and what you're going to have to do to like what different things you're going to have to learn, and then also just why we want to make this transition to begin with. Why do you want to fly gliders? And so that's what we'll start with. We're going to start by talking, why are we trying to get into soaring to begin with? And I think there's a few main reasons, but to start with, it's soaring is much more of a sport than normal powered flying is. Powered flying, you're trying to safely take off, go from point A to point B, and if you can do that, then you're doing what you're trying to do. Whereas in soaring, you're trying to safely take off, soar, and fly as long or as good of a flight as you can and get back safely. And so it's much more of a sport. If you're a better soaring pilot, you can fly further, or if you're a worse soaring pilot, you don't fly as far. And the point being that soaring can kind of allow you to develop skills and try to be better than your competitors, which is something you don't really see in a normal flying sense. You're not really trying to show up your buddies when you're in a powered sense. The other thing with soaring is that soaring's it'll teach you skills that you don't really get to learn in powered airplanes. And so there's a few different examples of this. For one, you don't really do pure engine out flying nearly like you do in soaring. Soaring, every single time you're flying a glider, it's engine out situation. So you learn energy management a lot better. You also learn how to read clouds and read mountains and understand lift and sink better. And these things are stuff you might kind of touch on in powered training, but soaring training will bring you to a much better understanding of that. So the other big factor here is just money. Flying small aircraft, small powered aircraft can cost just an arm and a leg, and flying gliders will be significantly cheaper. To get your glider transition is normally going to be maybe a fifth of the cost of doing your powered license, and gliders can fly very, very cheap compared to powered airplanes. Per hour we only charge $16 an hour. So you have to pay for the tow, but once you're up, the glider itself is very cheap. So um, let's talk about the actual requirements. If you're trying to get into it, what do you need to do? And so let's start with private. So if you want to be a soaring pilot, as a private pilot, and so you already have your private powered, you need to then essentially have logged at least 40 hours of flight time in a heavier than air aircraft with at least 3 hours in a glider. And that means you need 10 solo flight, or inside of that, you need 10 solo flights in a glider, where you're practicing different stuff listed in that part, and 3 training flights with an authorized instructor in a glider in preparation for a practical test. So essentially you need 3 total hours of flight time with 10 solo flights, and then obviously the 3 flights before within 2 calendar months, which is very, very low bar for this transition. Essentially you just need to fly with an instructor, learn how to fly the glider, do 10 solo flights, and then get sent on to your check ride. There's no knowledge exam required for the add-on, because you already have done the knowledge exam for powered. And another big one is there's no medical required. We self-assess our medical status, and you're not required to have medical or basic med or anything in order to fly a glider. So yeah. And then we move into talking about the requirements for you to soar as a commercial pilot. So these are going to be slightly higher, but still relatively simple. So if you're already a commercial powered pilot, you're going to need 200 hours of flight time as a pilot in a heavier than air aircraft, which you will already have, and then 20 flights in a glider as pilot in command, including at least 3 hours of flight training or 10 training flights with an authorized instructor. Or 5 solo flights in a glider on the areas of operation listed in that part. And so essentially what you need here is you need to fly with an instructor again, and then you just need to do 20 solo flights or 20 pilot and command flights. And then you have your 3 training flights within 2 calendar months of the check ride, and you're good to go. So fly with an instructor for up to 3 hours or 10 training flights, and then fly alone for 20 flights and get sent to a check ride. Once again,
one thing that the slide says 5 solo flights, and you said 20, and 20 is correct.
Well, so it's 20 flights as pilot in command with at least 5 solo flights, because technically you could already have your private glider, and then you wouldn't necessarily be doing solo flights. So that's kind of what they're getting at there.
Sorry.
But yeah, but yes, you're correct. But yeah, no knowledge exam is required once again, and no medical is required for glider flying once again. So even as a commercial glider pilot, you're not required to have a medical. So all right, now let's go ahead and talk about what's different about gliding. And this will kind of take up the rest of this conversation. And essentially, we're just going to discuss what are the things that you're going to have to learn. We're not going to discuss them really in depth, but we'll just kind of brief you on these are the things you're going to have to learn in order to make this transition well. So we'll talk about ground handling. We'll talk about how to fly the tow, the different maneuvers and stuff. How do we land? And then, some stuff about glider weather and speeds to fly and things like that. And we'll talk about that in just a second. So we'll start here with ground handling. And to start with, gliders are very fragile compared to, a lot of powered aircraft. There's a lot of fiberglass gliders, and these ships are very, very fragile. And the canopies on most gliders are fragile as well. So we need to be very careful. That means always, keeping our glider canopies closed. That means, kind of handling on the ground is a lot more of an issue than it is with powered aircraft. Powered aircraft, you just get in and taxi and you don't really think about it. Gliders, you need to push them out, and that means you need tail dollies or wing walkers, and you just need to be very vigilant that you're not causing damage to these gliders while you're transporting them out to the runway or pushing them back in from the runway. So also, you'll end up having to learn about, I guess, some of the like the wing runner signals that you'll end up getting. So most gliders are going to launch with somebody holding the wing to help stabilize you at the very beginning stages of your launch. And there's a lot of different signals and stuff that they end up, this wing runner is going to end up giving you. And so you'll end up kind of learning it. It's a bit like a baseball game where the baseball coach is giving different signals, and you need to understand what all that means. And so you'll end up learning this for your check ride. And after you launch, you get onto the tow. And the tow is essentially, so you have a 200-foot tow rope, which is supposed to keep you, pretty far away from the wake of the tow plane. And essentially what you're doing is you're flying formation with the tow plane, but just 200 feet behind him. And to start with, it's kind of a challenging thought because it's similar to, aerial refueling or something, where you're flying a formation from behind this plane. But if you build a sight picture of where the tow plane should be, it ends up being relatively easy. So when you get in the glider, just start trying to build that sight picture from the beginning. Where should the tow plane be? Where is a good tow position? And you'll be good. And you'll do a few different maneuvers on tow. Well, one example is where you'll box the wake. So this is where you make a box around the wake of the tow plane to kind of practice, different tow positions. And then you also have slack line, and slack line is where you get, above the tow plane and there's slack inside the rope. So the rope is not completely taut. And when that happens, it can be dangerous if it wraps around the glider, or if, the ring hits the glider, the tow ring hits the glider. And so we learn how to properly get rid of slack line on tow. And that both of those are maneuvers that you'll end up doing for your check ride. Another big thing that changes, this is one of the most obvious ones, is the landing. So when you land your glider, it's going to be very different than when you're landing your powered aircraft. And the main reason is that your energy management is very different. So when you're in a powered aircraft, if you get low on final, you add power and get back on approach. If you're in a glider, you're kind of in a lot of trouble if you get low on final. So it's much more about being careful about your energy management. And we use air brakes to moderate the rate of descent on approach. And it's similar to how you would use a throttle. But the big difference, once again, is you can't get power out of air brakes. You cannot rise back up from air brakes. You can just use them to moderate your descent rate. And so you'll learn a lot of kind of lessons about energy management when flying gliders onto approaches. And also, as everyone always says, you can't go around in a glider. So it teaches you kind of how to be aware of that and make sure that doesn't affect your flying. So performance and limitations for gliders is also going to be a big difference. Once again, let's think back to powered. In powered, you're doing these different cruise charts through gallons per hour, all these different things. In a glider, it's much more about your glide polar, which is an example is shown here, and essentially being able to understand what your glide polar is showing you. So your glide polar can tell you the best speeds for you to fly in different situations, and you have to understand how to read your glide polar and then how to apply that to the actual flight, which we'll talk about more when we talk about speed to fly. But first, we'll look at a DG 500 glide polar. This is actually a glider that we have at Soaring Society of Boulder, and it's a pretty common example of a two-seat glider. And you can see that you have a glide polar that will essentially tell you your sink speed at different speeds, and you would go through here and be able to use it to tell you, what's your best glide speed or what's your minimum sink airspeed, and that becomes really important here when we talk about speed to fly. Speed to fly is essentially telling you if you're in calm wind and you have no lift, you should fly your best glide. So you're in calm wind and there's no lift, no sink. Best glide airspeed is going to be your best is going to get you the longest glide distance. And if we go back here, we would find it on that glide polar and then apply it to that actual flight. And then, if you're in, like if you're flying downwind, so you have a tailwind behind you, you would fly min sync. Once again, that's going to be found on the glide polar, and you would use that. And there's more to it. We will learn more about it, once you get into training. But the important part is just understand that that's our performance and limitations, is how does a glide polar apply to our speed to fly. So it's a little bit different than, doing your charts with fuel burn and all that kind of stuff, because it's a different kind of airplane. All right, and then the big one here is going to be sources of lift. And that's kind of learning about how the atmosphere operates, and understanding where lift is, or what lift should look like, or and being able to kind of use that to make your glider flying better, to fly further distance or to get higher, whatever you're looking to do. And you'll kind of find that as a glider pilot, you begin to kind of study the clouds more than you did as if you were a powered pilot. So powered pilots are saying, hey, I want to go to Rapid City. I'm going to follow this airport and then go to that airport and then go to Rapid City, right? I'm just going to look at the ground or look at my GPS. Whereas with gliders, it's much more, we're looking at the air and we're seeing, hey, looks like there's a cloud over there. That might be representative of a thermal, or that might be representative of convergence or whatever. And that's where there's 4 major sources of lift: thermals, and then ridge lift, and convergence, and mountain wave. And you'll have to kind of learn each of those individually. What do those mean, in order to kind of identify it for each specific flight? What are you dealing with? How can you use it to your advantage? So mountain wave is a really pertinent one to us because we're here in Boulder, and Boulder experiences mountain wave, very, very often. We get very high wave, like our mountain wave extends very, very high, and it happens very frequently, especially during the winter. So you'll learn kind of what do rotor clouds look like? What do lenticular clouds look like? And that's why, some days in the winter it can be just, absolutely howling wind out of the west and be, extremely turbulent over the mountains, and you can learn why that's happening, and kind of use it to your advantage, even in the powered side of flying. Gliding, is a lot to learn, but if you do it correctly, you can get kind of cool views like this. This is from over Mount Evans, and you can kind of, there's so much to experience with gliding. So even if there's a lot to learn, it kind of can end up being a very rewarding experience if you stick around and make sure you learn all that. So yeah, that's all I've got.
Okay. Great. Hey, thanks, Eli. And anyway, as Eli is working on his getting a G added to his other airplane CFIs, his multi-engine CFI, and I think he'll be a great glider instructor as well as a great airplane instructor. And this photo that we're staring at right now, I assume you took this in our discus.
Yep, that was from that 300K flight that I did. But
yeah, so you can see the inside of the discus here a little bit, and what it looks like to be flying around in glider. Here in Colorado, of course, we go a lot higher than most private, single engine aircraft. We can climb a lot higher and stay up for a long time. As Eli mentioned, it's less expensive, and one of the reasons it's less expensive is once you get up, you're not burning fuel. And but the gliders are expensive in terms of maybe even relative to other airplanes. But anyway, it is the club that Soaring Society of Boulder, does make it much more affordable for us to go soaring. And so we're glad for that. We're glad, Eli, for you to do some of the towing that needs to happen. You've been one of our top tow pilots. Thanks so much. And thank you for this presentation. I guess your check ride is Monday. So we're all going to wish you, the best on passing that that check ride to add a G to your rating. So anyway, thanks so much, and go ahead and release this. Here we go. So go ahead and release this.